Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Tracking Changes with the new administration to help you manage contracts and grants, evolving affirmative action, and DEI requirements. I'm PCI's John Plinky, joined today by Bill Walter and Nichole Atallah. Before we get started, I have a single housekeeping announcement today. There's no CPE or CLP credit, but we will have a certificate of completion going to you 24 hours after the program is complete. In addition to that, we invite your questions. Please put your questions in the questions panel. Bill can see the questions as they come in. He will answer them as he can. If you would like to send them questions after the program, their contact information is on the slides. You can find it in the handouts panel. In addition, those slides will be sent to you 24 hours after the program in the same email with a certificate and a copy of the recording for today's program. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Take it away, Nichole.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nichole Atallah from Piliero, Mazza, and I'm here with Bill. Everybody knows Bill.
And I'm Bill Walter with Forvis Mazars. So, all right,
And
let's go.
yeah, let's do it. So, um, Bill and I talked was 2 weeks ago now, Bill. We talked about executive orders that have kind of come down the pike generally. There have been a number of them since then as well. Um, but today we wanted to dive in a little bit more deeply on some of this non-discrimination or legal discrimination stuff. I'm going to say stuff because there's a lot that's been happening, one right before our last session, and then as the weeks have evolved, we've kind of seen a little bit more about how the administration has responded to these executive orders, court challenges to these executive orders, a lot of questions about what this means for all of us, right, Bill? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk about the three main executive orders: 14173, which is this ending illegal discrimination; 14168, which is defending women from gender ideology extremism; and EO 14151. And then there's a bunch of agency memos we'll talk about, kind of unpack each one.
Okay.
Next slide, please. Bill's driving today.
Oh, I have the next slide up. Is it not what you're seeing?
Now it is. Now I'm good. Just
Oh,
a little
okay.
delay.
I thought I was doing well.
So what's this first one? The first one's ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. And my first disclaimer as a lawyer is never read a title and assume you know what the book says, right? Because a lot of these titles get confusing, and I think that's been part of what has been, it's like, what's in each of these things, and what do we have to do with them? And so 14173, I think, is the one that has the biggest immediate impact for contractors because it revoked Executive Order 11246, and I'm sure your head's spinning with all of the executive order numbers. That executive order has been around since the Johnson administration. It was kind of the big sister to Title VII. That's the way I think about it, right? So a lot of times you see the federal government issue executive orders before laws are passed or when they're being debated. It's like the thing that can happen first sometimes, right? And so this was the executive order that said, look, if you're going to be a federal contractor, you can't discriminate against people based on their gender or their minority status. And the Obama administration added sexual orientation and gender identity to that list of items. And so the Trump administration's view on it, because it had a lot of requirements that were in addition to Title VII, like maintaining affirmative action plans and doing certain outreach and recruiting, this was the executive order that led to the creation of the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. It had been around since the late 1960s, early 70s. It now is gone. And the OFCCP is basically shuttered. No one's home. They're all on admin leave, right? And so the Trump administration's view is that over the years, this, one, is unnecessary, and two, has led to essentially discrimination against other groups of people other than women and minorities. And so we're not going to do that anymore. That's kind of the impetus of revoking EO 11246. No one, by the way, is arguing that the Trump administration can't do this. This is one of the clear things that the Trump administration can do, is get rid of EO 11246. and all of the things that you have to do as a result of 11246. Recruiting, self-identification forms for applicants, affirmative action plans for race and gender. If you're over 50 employees, you don't have to do any of that stuff anymore. And what we're starting to see is those far deviations kind of come down the pike. We saw one from the Department of Defense last week. We've seen them from other agencies, which basically says, don't put EO 11246 or the accompanying FAR provisions in contracts anymore. In fact, take them out of contracts that you already have. That means an immediate action item for contractors is to take them out of subcontracts, right? So then, Bill, you'll have the answer to this one, even though you're not the guru on labor and employment. What if my contracting officer does not take out my FAR clause related to 11246? Do I still comply with it because I still have the FAR clause?
Well, that sounds like a legal question, and I would say if it's in your contract, I would do it.
You would do it.
But that's exactly. I have to.
Right, which is why they issue FAR deviations, right? So that's why they're pushing these FAR deviations and trying to make sure that people, because it's really confusing if it's in your contract. But no one's home, no one's enforcing it. Even if it's there, it's like one of these things that, like, even if it's there, no one's going to do anything about it. And in fact, given the next parts of the executive order, there are reasons why you might not want to keep doing it, right? Because of the next part. So then we kind of get on to the next part. So right now, you do not have to keep enforcing doing your AAPs related to 11246. You don't have to file your affirmative action plans. You don't have to do anything that you did relating to 11246, which is that OFCCP stuff for race and gender. Okay, we're going to talk about it in a minute. Veterans, disabilities, still there. Nothing happened to those. Okay, then we get to the next part of the executive order, which basically says, and by the way, if you do work with the federal government, you cannot maintain an illegal DEI program. There was no definition about what that was. What's an illegal DEI program? And so a bunch of diversity officers in higher education, and there are a number of lawsuits ongoing, they sued the Trump administration and they said, you can't do that because you haven't told us what illegal DEI is. And what the Trump administration was doing was essentially going through and saying, look, if we found something on your website that related to, equity or inclusion, we're just going to cancel your contracts because we know that you have an illegal DEI program. But they didn't define what that was. And so the court in the Federal District Court of Maryland said, no, you can't have something that broad that could impede on the First Amendment. You haven't defined what illegal DEI is, and you cannot make contractors certify that they're not going to maintain an illegal DEI program if you haven't told them what that is, so that a court can properly evaluate whether what you're doing is legal or not legal. Okay, so that's the other piece of this, and that piece has currently been enjoined. I put some sample certification language up. This is the certification language that we've seen circulate, and it essentially will say, if the injunction is lifted, it will say, look, if you're a contractor, you are going to confirm that you are compliant, and look at the third, fourth, and fifth words, in all respects, with all applicable federal anti-discrimination laws, and that is material to the government's payment under the False Claims Act. So what does this mean? If the injunction is lifted, if the Trump administration fixes the things it needs to fix and the injunction's lifted and they require this certification language, it's going to mean that your or a contractor's compliance with all federal anti-discrimination laws is of critical importance to your contract. And if you fail to do that, an employee may have not only a discrimination claim against you, but also a False Claims Act claim against you. So it's kind of a big deal. Like, this is like a plaintiff's lawyer's dream. It's a 2-for-1, right?
I guess whether you're doing it or not.
Exactly. So I actually think it could have some adverse effects that the Trump administration was not anticipating. Again, right now, if you are a contractor and you get sample certification like this from a contracting office, and I have seen it in the last couple of weeks, because they don't assume contracting offices are up to speed with all of the injunctions. They're just trying to get through paperwork like the rest of us, right? If you see this, you should politely and kindly push back a little bit and say, well, we believe that we are compliant in all respects with all federal anti-discrimination laws. It is our understanding that there is currently an injunction prohibiting us from executing this kind of certification. And so we're asking you to hold off on this until we get more answers from the court. Very nicely, right? Very nicely. Next slide.
Hopefully you've got it. It's now the EEO laws. Okay.
So I just wanted to very quickly list kind of the big hitters in the federal EEO laws. The number one question I get is the 8A program or small business programs going away as a result of the EEO? No, not right now. Those are statutory. They're there. And the second most popular question is, so I should get rid of all of my discrimination and harassment programs, just delete them from my handbook? And my answer is, please don't do that. Title VII is still a law. It is still there. Pregnancy Discrimination Act is still a law. The Americans with Disability, these are all statutory. They cannot be just thrown in the trash, regardless of what your newsfeed is telling you today. These are statutory requirements that can still be enforced. Even if the EEOC is not enforcing some of this stuff anymore, there's private rights of action for this. So do not ignore this stuff. You still have to comply with all of these federal laws. And in fact, as I mentioned on the last slide, if the injunction is lifted, compliance with these is even going to be more important, because you'll have a False Claims Act liability if you are non-compliant. It's really important that you take a look at it, brush it up, make sure that it's, doesn't unfairly disadvantage one group over another, but still there, still all good.
Okay. And, we do have a question that came in from Douglas on this, and it's more in my lane, I think. But his question is there any guidance regarding treatment of cost, i.e. allowability, for GovCons that choose to continue in-house DEI or environmental programs? And there is no real guidance that's available yet, but based on what Nichole has said, part of allowability, there's a 5-part test to allowability. And in there, it says compliance with applicable laws and regulations. So if all of this stuff gets clarified, and if you have DEI programs that fit that definition, the costs associated with those plans could be treated as an unallowable cost, depending on a whole bunch of other factors. But to answer your question, Douglas, there are no specific guidelines in place. As Nichole said, people are running through. They're just trying to get caught up with paperwork, and it's very dynamic. So I would say take a look at the programs that you do have. If you do have DEI programs that are in place that you think might fit that definition, start figuring out what you need to do. And if your company chooses to continue to do that, you would have to be able to identify that the costs associated with that are coming out of profit. We're not passing those costs on to the government, but there's going to be so many far-reaching impacts of that I do think we will have some allowability guidance coming out, not in the very near future, but I think probably by the end of the year, because it takes the auditors a while to come across the issue. Then they have to figure out what they want to do. Then they have to pass it through their own bureaucracy to put it into policy before it'll come out in a memo. So as soon as we see that, whatever session we're doing, if we're still doing these when that guidance comes out, we'll definitely make sure that we highlight that for everybody.
All right, next slide, please.
Okay, Vietnam era veterans.
So the next 2 slides are going to be really quick, but I wanted to just highlight that the VEVRA, or the Vietnam Era Veterans Readjustment Assistance Act, say it 5 times fast. It's a lot of fun. It's a mouthful of words, but basically this is the law that was signed in 1974 that protects veterans and requires contractors to take affirmative action to recruit, veterans. It gives hiring goals that they like to see you meet, but there's no quota or requirement. This is, again, a law. It has not gone away. So if you have over 50 employees, you should still be doing your VEVRA affirmative action plan. And even if you have under 50 employees, you should still be doing recruiting efforts, things like that. This will apply to, it applies to contracts over $25,000. I just wanted to highlight it's still here. It's still alive and well. They're not looking at the AAPs right now, but the AAPs are still a requirement. Next slide. Kind of the same thing with the Rehabilitation Act. The Rehabilitation Act is like the equivalent of the ADA, basically. It tracks the Americans with Disabilities Act quite closely. It also has a requirement to do an affirmative action plan for if you have over 50 employees, and even if you have under, you still have to do recruiting, self-identification, things like that. It has gone nowhere. It's still there. It's statutory. Again, can't just be erased because it's statutory. Next slide. Okay, so I wanted to move on to 14151, which is this ending radical wasteful DEI programs and preferencing. This is the EO that said we're going to, as a government, get rid of all of these DEI programs and environmental justice programs. This was kind of that first purge you saw of closing and shuttering of doors of government agencies and putting personnel on leave. This was like the first thing out of the gate that happened. This was also enjoined by that federal district court on February 21st. I will tell you, though, I haven't seen all these doors magically reopen. So even though a court said, hey, wait a second, you can't do this, what the court was trying to say is, look, the executive branch is not an all-encompassing branch. So if Congress told an agency to have a certain program or do something specific, we can't just shut that down. Congress has appropriated funds, right? So while the executive branch can go in and kind of decide that this is a discretionary program here or a discretionary program there, they can't just go and shutter all the doors just because there's, somebody said equity as part of the program or a training one day, which is basically kind of what was happening. It was very broad. But again, even though the court has enjoined this portion for now, again, these are all kind of temporary, litigation still ongoing, things can change here. I haven't seen exactly a broad brush reinstatement of all DEI personnel. So there's still some haggling going on. The lawyers at the DOJ were saying, well, you can't expect us to just put this all online tomorrow. And the judge says, well, you certainly took it off in a few days. Why can't you put it back on? But there's still litigation happening there. Again, I just wanted to let you know there's an injunction, but this didn't really have impact on contractors other than contractors saw contracts canceled, right? So I'm not going to say there was no impact on contractors because we did see a number of contracts terminated. And we talked last week about how to recoup those costs of termination, but it doesn't specifically impose additional obligations on contractors like the other one did.
Okay, and we do have another question came in from Andrew, kind of following up Douglas's question, and it's tied into the same DEI question. He says, hey, if we incurred DEI costs earlier this year, do I have to treat them all as unallowable costs? And I would say the answer to that is no, because at the time that you incurred those costs, they were not unallowable type costs. And even if you're incurring them today, based on the fact that it's in litigation, et cetera, it's the type of thing, they are not unallowable costs yet, depending on the terms and conditions and things like that. So if you incurred them earlier in the year, I would say keep them in as long as they are reasonable. But then once they become once they truly become not in accordance with regulations and law, then you would have to make sure that you're excluding them or have significant unallowable costs on your books.
Okay, next slide.
We're there.
Okay, so this is my favorite title, speaking of titles, Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. There's a lot of confusion about this executive order. So this is the executive order that basically said that the federal government, when they say sex, is going to refer to biological classification, like the sex you were born at birth. That's going to affect government documentation, such as driver's licenses and passports, and how we refer to, whether we have 3 or 4 columns for sex or just 2, right? The federal government is taking the position that it's 2. Agencies are also supposed to be using the word sex, not gender, because gender is apparently very confusing. So we're going to use sex as opposed to gender because we don't want to promote gender ideology anymore. And then agencies are supposed to ensure that, and this is the one I think that is the most confusing, that intimate spaces designed for women, girls, or females are designated as sex and not by gender identity. So they're supposed to say male and female. So bathroom signs are supposed to change. There is not currently anything in the executive order that says you have to force people who might be transgender to use one of those bathrooms or another bathroom. So some of the confusion I've seen from a practical standpoint is on, say, a military base where you might have a transgendered person who wants to use a male or female restroom. And do we have to force that person to use a specific restroom? That's creating some issues with state laws too, which protect gender identity and sexual orientation. There's just some realities if on site, but technically the EO itself does not say mandate use, check birth certificates. It is saying that we want to start talking about things in terms of like men and women as designated at birth. And so I think there's going to be some complicated situations that come up. I've seen some CEOs take very practical approaches to this, right? That if you have a bathroom door that locks, I saw one CEO last week basically say, if you want to use a female restroom and you think that that's going to be controversial, please go into that restroom, lock the outside door, use the restroom, and then come back out, unlock the door. Other CEOs are saying, no, basically show me your birth certificate. It's going to create some very interesting issues. We're just seeing the beginning of it. This is also where you're seeing agencies say remove pronouns from your email signatures. I'm getting a lot of questions on, does that apply to contractors? Not specifically, right? So there's no mandate that contractors have to remove pronouns if you chose to add pronouns to your email signatures. Again, there might be perception issues that you want to get out ahead of, given the tenor of this administration if you're a contractor, but there is no mandate that necessarily applies to contractors. But you might see things from contracting officers or prime contractors requesting or asking you to do that. Next slide. So I kind of made a list of things that I have been talking to clients about over the last several weeks. You want to take a look at any affirmative action policies that you have, even though we have this injunction by the Maryland court that says like, hey, the Trump administration is not supposed to be enforcing their, illegal DEI policy thing yet. We have seen them looking. We know that DOJ is using AI to scrub contractor websites. So it's a good time to take a look at your outward facing materials. Take a look at how you want to phrase things. Take a look at any affirmative action policies or plans to the questions we had earlier. There might be some DEI or affirmative action activities going on. Now's a good time to take a look at your kind of suite of activities and say like, hey, what was revoked under 11246? Do we have anything that we're concerned about that might promote preference of one race, gender, etc. over another? There are a number of agency memos that say that affinity groups, like if you have a women's group or a Southeast Asian group, those are okay as long as they don't give any preference in the employment scape, like with promotions, etc., for one group or another. So I get a lot of questions about affinity groups. But it's a good time to assess that stuff. Take a look under the hood and see what you've got there, right? You want to revise your applicant tracking and self-identification processes because You still might have EEO1. That's the report you have to do if you're over 100 employees, obligations there to track certain employee demographics, but you don't have to maybe do as much of the applicant tracking as you used to. So a good time to take a look at that process, your recruiting processes. Make sure you're taking a look at your EEO statements to see what they say. I think a lot of times we assume it's just a vanilla EEO statement on your job requisitions, handbooks, things like that. Look to see what language is there. Does it mention affirmative action plans when it maybe shouldn't mention affirmative action plans? And then take a look at your handbooks. Good time to brush up on what's required federally and what's required in your states. Make those updates to your contracts and subcontracts regarding 11246. And just really evaluating your process at this point while we wait for further instruction from the courts. So that's kind of what we're telling people they should be doing right now. And I think that is basically what we have. We have a couple minutes left for questions too.
Yep. And we do have a question from Alice. Alice says that she missed our first session, but she really likes being able to get an update every 2 weeks. So John and Nichole, she's asking, are we going to continue these trainings? And the answer is, yep, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Absolutely. So we're trying to do them every other week as we go through. Same thing for a half hour, etc.
Real quick, but hopefully useful.
Yep. Okay, so I don't see any other questions popping in the box. So with that, John, I guess you can take it away, sir.
All right. Everybody tell us how we did today. We hope we did well, but if we didn't, we would like to know. We will be posting the next session here later today. We just wanted to make sure that we had the topics set. So it'll be up on our site this time tomorrow. All right. I want to thank everyone for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Raquel. All right.